Good evening, and thank you for coming to the UCT Association of Black Alumni Transformation event. For the sake of ease of communication, can I ask that you put your phones and tablets on silent, please? Those who want to tweet, Facebook, or other social network, please remember to use the hashtag Rhodes must fall so that we can track the engagement. Conversations, contestations, and eruptions about power have always been part of the South African Academy. Under apartheid, universities had to position themselves in particular ways in relation to the apartheid state, which in turn intruded and was hell-bent on prescribing the appropriate ways to teach, do politics, and otherwise exist. There is significant scholarship on this matter. Liberal universities like Rhodes, UCT, the University of Natal, as it then was, and Wits prided themselves on a robust culture of questioning, resistance, and confrontation with the apartheid state. It is a tradition that is well documented, much referenced, and a legacy that these institutions proudly claim. It is also clear from surviving record that the contestatory politics of the liberal universities were allied to, but radically different, from the politics espoused at black campuses such as Fort Hare, Turfloop, UWC, Medunsa, or even University of Natal Black Section. The walkout of black students out of a NUSAS conference that eventually, out of a NUSAS conference that eventually led to the formation of SASO is also well known. Fast forward to the change in country during which some of us entered UCT in the 90s, in 1990, and the change in tenor, the emergence of a discourse for the transformation of higher education that was both urgent and widely echoed, even if not generally welcome. How is it that universities like UCT, with the liberal and anti-racist histories they claim, continue to show such limited transformation in 2015? The work of scholars like Ritumetsi Iwakeng Mabokela is particularly instructive here in explaining how what is often claimed as a pervasive culture of questioning and apartheid resistance at places like UCT was in fact very imaginative political activism of a small minority on these campuses. In 3 books, a PhD dissertation, and various articles published in the late 90s and early 2000s, Mabokela probes many questions and quandaries that continue to plague the polemic on higher education in South Africa and Namibia. In recent weeks, the movement that organizes under the hashtag Rhodes Must Fall has captured the national imagination in unprecedented ways. Some of the concerns are recurring ones that have not adequately been addressed about the failure of the transformation project 21 years after the onset of democracy. Rhodes Must Fall has pushed the agenda of student and staff transformation energies at UCT and elsewhere, and have convened over the same issues without Rhodes Must Fall has pushed the agenda of transformation out of the closed, repetitive campus spaces and bled a new urgency into it. If student and staff transformation energies at UCTs and elsewhere have convened over the same issues without solving them, then campaigns such as Rhodes Must Fall press for a change in the grammar of engagement, of language, and of symbolism. Like its allied movements, such as Rhodes So White at Rhodes and Transform Vets, this movement builds coalitions across different sectors of UCT communities, invested in seeing the formats and the shifts finally happen, and to do so in meaningful ways, not just in terms of student numbers, but staff numbers and employment patterns and practices, institutional culture, the knowledge and education projects, structures of ownership and access, as well as the symbolism around which resistance to transformation coalesces. My name is Phumla Dineo Gola, a graduate of UCT. I graduated 3 times from this institution, who first registered at UCT in 1990. I'm also an alumni of the universities of Warwick and Munich. I'm associate professor at Wits and have been associated with various other South African institutions. Many of the issues that are pressing today apply to universities also across our country, not just UCT, even if our focus tonight will be specifically on UCT. Our panelists will all speak for a set amount of time, after which there'll be questions and comments from the floor. I'm going to introduce all the panelists now, and then rather than introduce them in the order in which they'll speak. The first speaker will be Advocate Rhodes Solomons. Advocate Rhodes Solomons is an advocate of the High Court, although not currently in practice, who graduated from UCT in 1986. He also graduated from the University of the Western Cape. He's the chair of the Western Cape UCT Association of Black Alumni and national president of the same, having previously chaired the UCT Alumni Advisory Board. He's founder of the Rhodes Sol Sport and Leisure Group and the Lumkela Group, sits on various boards, and previously headed the sports and culture in the Western Cape. You can consult the longer bio that came with your invitation for further details on him. After him will speak Dr. Max Price, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town and who previously was Dean of Health Sciences at the University of the Witwatersrand. His previous work has been on public health, health policy, ethical leadership, and the intersections of higher education and economic development. You also received a longer bio for Dr. Max Price in your invitation. Mr. Ramabina Mahaba is president of the UCT SRC and formerly served as labor and services coordinator on a previous SRC. He's studying towards a Bachelor of Social Sciences with psychology and philosophy as majors. During his time as UCT, he has served on the UCT Admissions Policy, Institutional Forum, Readmissions and Appeals Committee, as well as on the Tender Adjudication Committee. He will be followed by Dr. Iqbal Souvey, who's a qualified medical practitioner with a specialist degree in sports medicine, who's also an alumnus of the University of Cape Town, the American College of Sports Medicine, and Harvard University. He was a member and chairperson of the UCT's GSB's advisory board. He served on the Governor's Committee of the UCT Foundation until 2013. He's also executive chair of Independent News and Media, and also chairs various boards. If you want his longer bio, again, please consult the invitation. Our final speaker is Dr. Shose Kesi, who holds a PhD from the London School of Economics and is a fellow of the W.E.B. Du Bois Research Institute, Hutchinson Center, Harvard University. She is senior lecturer in psychology at UCT, who previously worked in the development sector, focusing on reproductive health, HIV/AIDS, and program evaluation. The focus of her research is on community-based empowerment and social change, particularly exploring how to address issues of identity, such as race, class, and gender, that impact on people's participation in transformation efforts. She's currently working on the development of photo voice methodology as a research tool that can raise consciousness and mobilize community groups into social action. Advocate Rhodes Solomons.
Oh, that works. Thank you. Thanks, Phumla. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the UCTABA executive, let me thank you all for positively responding to our invite to this event as we wrestle with this phenomena called change, or commonly known as transformation at UCT. As indicated by myself publicly, we've been engaging the Vice-Chancellor about this matter for quite a while. And this has led to this public sharing of views and ideas as to how we can assist to change UCT for the better for all who work and study here. This gathering has been arranged so that you as alumni can get a better sense of the state of transformation at UCT, and we can deliberate about what we as alumni can do to assist with the transformation program at UCT in a sustainable way. We have gathered a grouping of speakers, as you heard, who together with the Vice-Chancellor should know what they are talking about, and we thank all of them for availing themselves. And I'm sure all of you are looking forward to hearing the different views. When UCTABA was formed a number of years ago by a few black alumni, it was so that black alumni can give back to those who come after us by first starting a bursary fund so that we can assist more black people to become academics at UCT, and also to help UCT to transform faster and better. I'm glad to say that as black alumni, as UCTABA, we have raised almost R1 million so far, and we have assisted a number of students to study further. And the support of many of you who are sitting here is greatly appreciated. We are of the view that whilst the Vice-Chancellor and the majority of his management team are on record of supporting transformation, it's our contention that the pace is too slow and it is not decisive enough. Hence the Rhodes statue debacle. Because as I say in Afrikaans, students are gatvol. Sorry for my language. And staff are forming all kinds of pressure groups because there are no visible changes in the composition of the academic leadership at the university. We are of the firm view that whilst the university leadership might have passed a new admissions policy, there are way too many entities and individuals that are uneasy or unhappy with it or aspects of it. It is our contention that that policy will have unintended consequences, and maybe we need to go back to the drawing board. We are also aware about the unhappiness about UCT's outsourcing of certain functions, and thereby having less of a workforce which has negative consequences. But that is for another day. We commend the Vice-Chancellor and his team with a myriad of transformation initiatives. But the question is, why is there then still so much discord at this place? Whether one talks to staff, workers, students, or even ex-staff, clearly, as I say, all is not well in Denmark or on the Hill at UCT. We hear about the UCT Transformation Committee that the university has, but it clearly to us it does not seem right that that committee is chaired by the Vice-Chancellor. How can you chair a body that must advise, admonish, evaluate how you are doing with regard to transforming your institution? Clearly, there is a need for more independence. Or in law, they say you can't be a judge in your own cause. We are encouraged as UCTABA by the recent student activism we see on campus and the impetus that this has given to propelling the university leadership to grapple with matters that they rather would have wanted to have dealt with in their own time and in their own way. Students, as we said continuously, must ask uncomfortable questions of society and rattle the cages, because institutions for higher learning are supposed to be incubators for precisely that. The only parameters, what we are saying, within which they must operate is our constitutional democracy that provides a framework for how all of us must interact. Our Constitution is, after all, the bedrock of our democracy, and it enjoins us to live and enjoy our hard-fought freedoms. On a lighter note, as I conclude, I went to Bremner Building the other night after, what's it called now? Azania House. Is it called Azania House now? Okay. We knew it as Bremner Building, in any case. And I was quite taken by the fact that Dr. Price and his management team, maybe have allowed the students to sleep and study at that boardroom. I saw some were in the one room, they were talking and they were going to watch a video, I think on Marikana or something, and the other rooms, others were working. I'll be done by then. Back in the day, I remember during our marches in the 1980s, to integrate the student residences at UCT, the university management made us pitch our tents in what was then called Union Avenue. I don't know what's it called now. I don't know what's it called now. The then Union Avenue. And that is where we had to sleep. The university will find UCTABA will be a critical but supportive partner as it moves forward on the transformation path. But we will insist that it picks up the pace and it do it in a fundamental way so that the university becomes a better place for all who work, study, and teach at it. Thank you.
Dr. Price. Thank you, Advocate Rod Solomons. A slight adjustment, please hashtag UCTABA, which is UCTABA, transformation as well, please. Dr. Price.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to everyone. It's really wonderful to have such a great turnout. The original format was going to be, I think, slightly different, and I do find myself challenged by the time available and how to approach this, because there are, I understand, at least 3 speakers who are going to address particular issues in some depth: the perspective of the students and student transformation, perspective of the staff, perspective of the institutional climate, and I need to try to give a much more bigger overview without yet having heard what they're going to say. So I start off by qualifying my introduction by saying it's going to be a bit patchy, and I think not do justice to the scope of what there is. Transformation, the premise which Advocate Solomons presented for this discussion was that this is a conversation with sharing our views, sharing our ideas, because we need to take collective ownership of the project of transformation. It's not a project that is the responsibility of the Vice-Chancellor or the Deputy Vice-Chancellors, nor is it simply the responsibility of the students, nor clearly of the alumni, but it's something we need to do together. And so I welcome this opportunity to hear your ideas and to present to you some of ours. I also want to apologize because the reason the meeting is running late is because of me. I was at the convocation had held, and I'm sure all of the alumni would have received invitations to the convocation meeting, which was at 5 o'clock, and that one was the formal consultation with the convocation with respect to the issue of the statue. It ran well over time, but I'm afraid that I had to be there to listen to what was being said, and that was the reason that we ran half an hour late here. Okay. Transformation has many dimensions. Some of them are external. Our job as a university is to transform society. It is to transform the world we live in. And I'm going to just say 3 or 4 points about that, although I think it is at least half of what we do, but it's not the half, I think, that people tonight are particularly interested in. But not to say anything about it, to think of transformation as only bean counting, as only about numbers, misses, I think, a key aspect of what a university's job is. So, what are those external things? Well, firstly, it's to provide a really good education to students who often come out of communities where there hasn't been university education before. Make sure that they have the kind of education that gets them jobs and that enables them to perform as professionals in society. And I'm pleased to say that we have amongst the highest rates of employment amongst our graduates. Somewhere around 96% of our graduates who want to have jobs within 18 months have jobs. That's not something one should take for granted. Many students, many universities have graduate unemployment rates which are in the 30s or 40%. So it's something that's important in what we do. The second is research, and that is to identify the social challenges such as poverty and inequality, such as the school system, such as violence and substance abuse, such as climate change and development, youth unemployment. And these are the pandemic of infectious diseases. Would you mind passing me some water in a glass, please? And these are all projects which we have identified consciously. We have said the university has resources that it can apply to changing society, and we should do so, and we put considerable resources into that. Another is to graduate and develop active citizens, people who will not just know their professional disciplines, but who will also, want to change the world through lobbying, through policy, through being active citizens. And this too is something which we don't assume will just happen to students. It is a conscious part of our transformation agenda, whether it is promoting volunteerism, participation in the welfare in the development organizations among students, incentivizing that through granting recognition on the transcript for involvement in social responsiveness type work, offering particular courses such as the Global Citizenship course, which is an additional course students can take and is reflected on their transcript, that addresses issues like poverty and inequality, war and peace, and Southern African and African history. And then, of course, we have a function as public intellectuals, and we encourage and incentivize academics themselves to be engaging in the public arena continuously. We have a chair of constitutional development, which is funded in part primarily to ensure that there are academics who are looking at what's happening to our constitutional democracy and raising those issues in the public arena. But let me turn to the internal transformation, because that is where our focus is tonight. And with respect to internal transformation, we really identify 4 arenas: student transformation, staff transformation, institutional climate, and curricula. Now, let me start with students then. Although the introductions suggested that but many parts of the chair's introduction and Advocate Solomon's introduction suggested that there's been little or no transformation, I think any of you who were, and all of you are alumni, who were here in the 80s and early 90s, if you came to the campus and walked around today, you would have to agree that it is a substantially different campus. It is not the campus that we had in the early 90s. It is different from a student point of view in that we have about 60% of our students are black students. The numbers you will hear quoted are slightly different depending on whether we're including international students or not, because the international students tend not to be classified by race, although many of them, the majority of them, 3/4 of them, are from other African countries and obviously are black. We have not only addressed the issue and are addressing, we haven't got to where we want to go. Each year we set stretch targets for each faculty of numbers of African, colored, and Indian students. In fact, in Indian students, in most cases, we've exceeded the targets, and so we no longer have a program that specifically draws in or favors Indian students. But for colored and African students, we've not reached the targets, and so we have stretch targets, but we've made good progress. But it's not only about how many students get admitted. It's about ensuring that they are successful. And in that regard, we have a huge investment in academic development programs, extended programs, EDUs, educational development units, which have achieved what we believe are the highest success rates amongst black students and students from disadvantaged backgrounds, including white students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So we it's not a revolving door syndrome, which you do get in many situations where you have a rapid increase in admissions of students who were previously denied access. Our students and our goal is to increase that. We have not yet got equal completion rates, equal graduation rates amongst white and black students, but the ranges are narrowing, and we certainly aim to narrow them more. A third element of access is financial aid. If you were to read the newspapers from the first month or two of this year, you would have noticed that across the country at many campuses, there were riots, unrest, students were preventing other students from getting onto campus, lectures were cancelled, some campuses were closed, some universities were closed because of the degree of unrest, most of which was around so-called financial exclusions and students not having enough, not being funded to study. At UCT, we have for the last 4 years been able to raise the funds and guarantee that every student that we admit academically will be funded, and that we will not turn them away for financial reasons. Sometimes there are little hitches. For example, if students don't apply for financial aid and they arrive here and we don't know that they would have needed it, or because they have to submit some evidence of their parents' income and they haven't got the necessary evidence in time, there are sometimes hitches. But in general, we have a, I think, very humane system of bailouts so that even those students do not, we try to prevent them from falling through the cracks. That is a massive commitment to transformation. And it's recognizing that our students are not just middle-class students. Many of them, a significant number of them, come from poor backgrounds and would not be able to get access to UCT without the funding. So while I'm talking about students, I want to say something about the admissions policy because I was asked to do so specifically. In fact, I think this meeting originated with the focus was just going to be on the admissions policy. In the time I have, I can't unpack it in detail. But I want to dispel the main myth that is propagated, which is that the admissions policy has abandoned race, and that race doesn't feature in the admissions policy. The admissions policy has 3 channels of admission into any given cohort. One channel is marks alone. We want the best students in the country, we want the top performers in the country, and a certain proportion, let's say 25%, it's different in different faculties, but a certain proportion will be admitted just because they are the top performers in the country. We have another category which is based on race, and where students are classified into an open category, colored or African, and there we have targets of how many we want to achieve, and they're only competing in their own pools. So race, firstly, the targets are set by race. We have not done away with race in terms of setting the targets and monitoring. And secondly, this channel of admission uses race as the main criteria in order to ensure that we achieve those targets. And then thirdly, we have merit weighted by disadvantage. So here we recognize that if you have 2 students, one comes from a township school and one comes from, let's say, a Model C school or a private school, and they both get 70%, it would be wrong to think that they are equal and that they have equal talents and equal potential. Because the one who has got 70% from a township school has overcome incredible odds. And in doing so, probably their parents hadn't been to university, they didn't have 24/7 internet, they didn't have laboratories at school. You know the story. Whereas the other students have had all of those benefits. And so we take the disadvantage into account and we increase the marks. Oh my goodness, so, right. We increase, I hope Rod is feeling guilty about this. We increase the marks of those students, and they can be black or white, but in a certain proportion because of the weighting, the index of disadvantage. Now, most of those students are black students because the nature of that of class race division in South Africa is that most black students are poor and most poor students are black. And so inevitably that is a big boost for the black intake of black students. But it's based on what we think is a fairer measure of competition. Okay, I've only talked about students. Talking about transformation in terms of institutional climate, there are many dimensions to institutional climate. Some of them are the symbols and names of buildings. And in that regard, again, we didn't wake up this year to say, or last year to say we need to think about the Rhodes statue. We have been focusing on this over the years, and there are many buildings which have, in order to recognize other heritages. There is the Sissigul Plaza, the Steve Biko building, the recently named A.C. Jordan building, Neville Alexander, Dumo Bakwa. So there are a whole range of naming and symbols. The Hurikwacha statue, which was commissioned, stands next to Jamie Hall and brings out something of our Khoisan heritage. A slave memorial, which is currently under construction in the new economics building. So what has changed, and we decided last year, was that we hadn't taken down names or statues that previously existed. That is a different approach to simply recognizing other heritages. But we felt that we did have to consider that. In October last year, when we were laying out our plans for 2015, we identified this, including the Rhodes statue in Jamson Hall, and we had laid out a deliberative program. I should emphasize that although there's been opposition or people have raised the issue of the Rhodes statue, there has never been any formal process. No SRC has ever passed a motion to have the Rhodes statue removed before. No SRC member on council, which is the body that would make this decision, has ever proposed that. No Senate or institutional forum has ever had this debate. So this was, although people know that there's been unhappiness about it, it never had the force, the momentum of something which people really believed would change. What happened with the students' protests, so we initiated that process, but it was going to be a slow and deliberative process. I confess that when we started, I did not think it would achieve enough support for the statue to be removed, but the student protest has lit a fire, which we have welcomed, because I think it has resulted in far more potential for transformation around these things than was there before. We also welcome the student activism about these issues internally and issues externally. Institutional culture is also about other things. It's about a sense of victimization, and we implemented something, an ombud. When we identified that, we created an ombuds office so that people could go somewhere confidential and anonymous. We have an office called DISCO, the Office for Discrimination and Harassment. We have been doing institutional climate surveys. We had a program called Kaluma, which was a series of 2-day workshops where we took staff away, 20 people at a time, external facilitator, to start addressing issues of cultural competencies, intercultural competencies. But having said all of that, I have no doubt that, and I appreciate that the experiences of many black students and staff are real and painful in that they experience institutional racism or subliminal racism. It's usually not overt. It's not usually people swearing at each other or making racist comments. It's usually subliminal. It's in how we behave, how we speak to each other, how we invisibilize people, how we don't notice the hand of the black student that goes up to ask a question, how we speak about people. And those are things which are really challenges to change, but we need everyone's help and ideas in how to do that. And we've got a long way to go. Staff, I've got a feeling I should come back to this because I think this is going to be addressed significantly. My job is really to acknowledge that we've made little progress. We've made some progress at the junior levels, roughly 27% of our academic staff. We divide the staff into academic and support staff. Amongst support staff, about 72% are people of color. Amongst academic staff, about 27% are people of color, are black staff. That excludes the international staff. Talking only about the South African staff. And of that 27%, the majority are in the ranks of lecturer and senior lecturer and researcher. Very few are in the ranks of professor. And I hope I'll have an opportunity, rather than spending longer now, to respond when others have spoken and have helped identify what the challenges are. I want to acknowledge that the challenges are there. I mentioned, fourthly, curricula. And curricula is an area where I think we've had significant change, but patchy change. So curricula tend to be driven within departments, a course convener, the history department, the biomedical sciences department, the surgery department. And in each case, those curricula lend themselves more or less to different kinds of transformation and different kinds of transformed pedagogy. But also, they are driven by people with more or less passion. I would say in health sciences faculty, for example, there's been considerable transformation of the curriculum. And in various other faculties they have. We've created particular units, a unit, for example, called the Center for Comparative Law in Africa, whose job is an absolutely Afrocentric approach to understanding the different legal systems that exist on the continent and how they can be aligned to promote more regional integration. But there are other parts of the law faculty where the curriculum is untransformed and unchanged, similarly in many other parts. So I think this is work that we still have to do, and we welcome the initiatives and want students and staff to be partners in that. I think we will find that they don't have to bash the door down, that there is absolutely an openness. So, Chair, I'll conclude by just saying I think this is a very important moment in the history of the university. Many people look back to a very famous sit-in in the Bremner building in 1968. Well, it's the Bremner building for me and for the university. Chair, please protect me.
Please let Dr. Price finish.
There's a lobby that wants to call it Azania House. As far as the university is concerned, it's the Bremner building. There was a famous sit-in in 1968 around the issue of Professor Archie Mafeji, who was offered a job and then the offer was withdrawn under government pressure. That sit-in and that episode in history has remained a signal moment in the history of UCT in its fights against apartheid and in its collusion with apartheid. And many people who are in the university remember that as the importance of that moment. I think this is a moment like that, and it will be remembered by students and staff decades hence still as a key turning point which reflected, and the removal of the statue, which I hope will be removed when the council meets tomorrow, after the council meets tomorrow, that will reflect a rupture with the past, a much more decisive challenge to our colonialist history and the extent to which UCT is caught up in that history or has challenged it, and that I hope it will mark a point at which there is a significant acceleration of transformation in all of these dimensions and a coming together of all of the stakeholders around these issues, because I think that the climate is ripe for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Price. Dr. Sauvé? Oh, sorry, Mr. Mahat.
Greetings to the Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Max Price, the Chairperson of UCTABA, Western Cape, Advocate Rob Solomons, Dr. Iqbal Save, Dr. Soshi Casey, and also the President of the Convocation, Professor Bani Pitan. And to the audience at large, I greet you all. As I was thinking about what to say today, I said to myself, I want to actually focus on part of the cause, not the symptoms. And I'm going to be frank in my discussions. We find ourselves at UCT where students are no longer complaining and sitting down on their buttocks talking of transformation. Students have risen up and have taken the hefty burden of bringing about radical and progressive change to the institution. Martin Luther King Jr. said that the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain neutral in times of great moral conflict. The students have decided to speak out. What about yourselves? Are you going to commence with your life's quest to maximize utility as a consumer and economic profit as a producer? Are you willing to sacrifice your privilege and join the clarion call, evoked by students, and stand with us in saying no more? We cannot breathe in this space. Whites continue to use their position of privilege to create a socio-political quagmire such that blacks fight among themselves. The new generation has been bombarded into believing that the ANC government is the problem. Undoubtedly, the ANC is liable for some of the challenges facing the black masses. But the black folks' problem is still the chieftaincy, or is still chiefly the potency of whiteness in this space. In the new democratic dispensation, we only have been concerned with the Rainbow Nation rhetoric and singing Kumbaya. while our economy still reflects the same socio-economic disparities of the apartheid era. Democracy has granted a few blacks seats at the master's table. The rest are still fighting over the breadcrumbs falling off the table. And it is these few privileged and mostly politically connected blacks who assist the white master in maintaining the status quo. Whites have not begun to see blacks as equals and being capable to think for themselves. They continually want to say how we break the shackles of our oppression, which is administered and maintained by them. They cry foul as soon as blacks start organizing themselves and seeking or speaking for themselves. Deep down, they understand that they stand to lose their privilege. And this is the same thing that we've been facing and or been confronted with, being part of the Rhodes Must Fall movement. The white liberal has continued to play a rather peculiar role in the oppression of the black masses. His racist and conservative ways continue to be shielded in his subtle and angelic approach. It is the white liberal who is at the forefront of spreading the gospel of integration in a peaceful society. Mind you, UCT is a liberal institution. So I'm talking about the cause, part of the cause. White liberals point towards the white conservatives as the problem, and they have convinced themselves that they have arrived at enlightenment pertaining to the sins committed by their forefathers. Yet consciously, they share the same set of values and desires to protect their privilege. The ideology and culture of formerly white-only spaces has not changed. What has taken place is that blacks have now been given access to these spaces of living and learning, in order to immerse themselves in Western culture. Thus, for the blacks to enjoy the benefits of accessing these spaces, they have to integrate into whiteness. Our integration is nothing but the black people assimilating to what is already established, as ordained, as righteous, as intelligent, as beautiful, as angelic whiteness. It is a matter of fact that integration has only benefited the whites as opposed to the blacks. Those blacks that now sit at the same table with whites have rid themselves of their languages, culture, and overall sense of self, and have lost more than they'll ever be able to gain. And it is these very same blacks that we advocate to occupy the positions of privilege in these institutions. For them to be able to radically transform the institutions, we are forever disappointed. The so-called integration in South Africa has given a false sense of hope and belonging, which lead them to misdiagnose the cause of their plight. Black men wake up. Black lady wake up. It cannot be the case that in this day and age that blacks still are seen as mere appendages to a world society. We want UCT to transform, and we are going to transform it ourselves, if needs be. How is it that we have become competent or content with a university like UCT that only has 6 permanent full-time African professors and only 5 full-time colored professors? Professor Nglena Mangwini's article wrote about the fact that the number of black South African academics at UCT in 2013 was 48 out of 1,400. That's only 3%. How can we be content with such statistics? Our present-day society, deeply rooted in capitalistic ideals and values, is characterized by gross poverty, death from preventable diseases, corruption, and starvation. Yet we have machinery that gives abundance, and a rich earth that provides abundantly. But many are still in need. More than intelligence, we need compassion, we need love, we need humanity. Our path leads only to despondency and lassitude. Is dystopia the ends we speak or we seek? May the hour come upon us where we suspend our egoistic attitudes and dedicate ourselves to eradicating poverty and inequality. We've got to realign our ends to a commitment to a better life for all. Freedom is not about having an opportunity to live like whites or to be like whites. It is the right to self-determination and a dignified life. It must be known that what is taking place is only the beginning. Blacks must fathom the fact that whites have still remained in positions of power. We therefore need to consolidate our power and break the resistance of the white community in trying to preserve the status quo. Blacks need to rally behind dismantling the white supremacy to its very core. It is always us, blacks, wanting to reconcile, to forgive and forget, while whites stand on the sidelines enjoying their privilege. No matter how much flowery language you may employ to conceal the truth, the reality is it is the whites who have reaped the benefits of our negotiated democracy. Blacks have gotten a raw deal. We are murdered in plain daylight for demanding a decent living wage from the white capitalists, and nothing is done about it. It is saddening to see institutions of higher learning, the likes of UCT, being the hub of massive creation of non-whites, blacks who worship at the altar of whiteness. UCT environments propagates Uncle Toms, black liberals, who will take every opportunity to ridicule blacks who speak of the problem of racism. They claim that class is the issue. The majority of our people are not fooled by this facade of lies. Our struggle is not simply class antagonism. Liberal institutions are the factories that offer blacks who aspire to be white despite their pigmentation an opportunity to do so. Blacks are being dangled like, I'm coming to my conclusion. Blacks are being dangled a carrot like a donkey, with a perception of change at sight, yet never reaching any end result. Black folks must rid themselves of the ulcer called assimilation. We need to eliminate the need to assimilate in any way, shape, or form to whiteness, because we are perpetuating our own oppression and destruction of our own humanity. Unity among blacks is a necessary first step, and the goal is self-determination towards the creation of an independent African society.
Thank you, Mr. Mahabe. The next speaker is Dr. Iqbal Sufay.
We'll have a microphone. Ah, this one. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow panelists, to the brave young women earlier, right? Behind us, yeah. You transformed very quickly, changed. And say thank you very much for inviting me, Advocate Rhodes. For an institution of higher learning, I think you'd get the basic things right, because from what I've understood from these debates, if you're white, it equates to being superior. Well, that's what some people certainly believe. But the very most basic thing was someone that has got 3 degrees from this institution and someone that's chaired advisory boards and has been on advisory boards, you'd think they'd get my surname spelling right. So let me put it to them that my surname is spelled S-U-R-V-E and not S-U-R-V-E-Y. For institution of higher learning, is it?
I didn't write it.
Is it because I'm black? Got to add an extra mark.
The chair did not write.
Don't blame the black man, okay, for that mistake. This is an institution of high learning. So anyway, just for all of you, it's spelled S-U-R-V-E. Look, I was going to come here with the jeans and a T-shirt because my Mondays at my office is with the jeans and a T-shirt. And Sandile Zungu, who was there in my office, told me earlier today. And firstly, he made me very late. And so I thought, what the hell, I'm not going to go home and change. But more importantly, I thought, why should I dress up for an institution that doesn't respect me as a black man, that has come from this institution? And then I thought, wait a minute, I'm not here for this institution. I'm here to address my fellow black alumni. And therefore, I went home and put on a suit and a tie. So I thought I need to respect you. Okay. So now, I have to be very careful what I say, because firstly, the media is here. And secondly, UCT Communications Department is here. And they have a way of finding things into the media that tends to distort things. So I hope you're recording what I'm saying, okay? So there's no distortion about what I'm saying. You know, my entire life, I've lived a principled position. I'm a non-racialist. I remember what Antonio Gramsci said in his prison diaries. This is the interrogation that we're facing, when the old is not yet dead and the new is not yet born. I think UCT is pretty much in that space at the moment. The problem with me is that I get into a lot of trouble because I speak my mind. I'm not afraid of anybody. And frankly speaking, you know, I have my own resources to be able to tackle them. They've tried to stop me from saying what I want to say. It hasn't worked. And it will never work. Because the one thing that I will be true to is to be my authentic self. So sometimes I'm going to say things here which you won't like me for. But frankly speaking, that's what you have to do. If you believe in real transformation and real change, you must not be afraid of the consequences, because that's how they get to you. Because they put their, you know, they threaten you with the careers that you will not advance if you speak because your career is under threat. Because ultimately they make the decisions. They threaten you with scholarships, with this, with that, and everything else, or even with passing. Or as a lecturer said to me in my final year, you know, why don't you keep quiet in one of the examinations? So I've been through this institution. I know it very well. I've got 3 degrees from this particular institution. Frankly speaking, it's a racist institution. Frankly speaking, it's an institution that hasn't changed 20 years into our democracy. And those charlatans of change that continue to pretend to change have no intention of changing. Because until you change the power structure of this institution, you will have no change. They'll pay lip service to the change, they'll remove a statue or two, they'll cover it up here or there, but that's fundamentally not the problem. The problem is that the leadership of this institution needs to change. It cannot not represent, and it cannot just change with a token black vice-chancellor. It has to change entirely from the vice-chancellor to senior management, faculty heads, and senior lecturers. Okay. And workers should not be outsourced. They should be part and parcel of this institution and its decision-making. And only until you do that can there be real change in this institution. No elite in the world has ever removed itself from power. It has never existed. And it's not going to exist. It's not going to happen in this institution. They'll play for time. They'll take you in a different direction and do all those sorts of things. They'll pay lip service, as they often do, to real change. I stood in this university not a long time ago, just over 2 decades ago, launching the Black Student Society. Some of you are sitting here. Subsequent to that, we launched Azaso and Sansco, and we led the student movement. We did not ask for change, we demanded change. And we demanded that institutions of power in this country that oppress us must change. And we took the revolution. No one gave it to us. Okay. Now, quite frankly speaking, my own media experience, as an example, is when I took over independent media and I made the changes which I'm telling you this institution has to make. they said, well, the readership will go down, the circulation will go down, everything will go down. The truth is, yesterday the AMS results were released. The Cape Times readership has gone up by 35,000, in spite of what some person has said about a boycott of the Cape Times. The Argus readership has gone up by 65,000. In 10 years, since we took over the Cape Times, in the 10 years before we took it over, it was declining. For the first time, circulation readership is going up. Why? The reason is because we brought about the real change. We started speaking about people's lives as they are reflected in this community in Cape Town. We started giving voice to different people, poor and rich. We started giving voice to different parts of our society. No longer was it okay to be a UCT student and piss on a black cleaner. No longer was it okay to be a UCT student and beat up a security guard and have nothing done by the leadership of the institution. Okay? So that kind of behavior is what our newspapers are reflecting. And because we are correctly reflecting it, people are buying it because for the first time they're beginning to see that. Now I know there'll be attempts to silence me, okay? But the point is this. The point is this. I'll be shortly silenced, don't worry. The point is this. Frankly speaking, this is not your institution. This is a public institution receiving public money. And you do not own it. You do not have the right to determine what happens at this institution. It needs to be democratized. It's been funded on the back of the South African taxpayer. It's been funded on the back of our democracy. And if you want real change, I suggest that change the leadership of this institution. Change it in its entirety. Okay? It's no longer acceptable. And let's demand that change, because that change is real. Our people have a right to participate in the leadership of this institution. That is a right. That is not a request. Okay? We have a right to suggest that because we are black, it takes us 20 years to become professors. It's no different to the lecturers at medical school that told us we can never qualify. We were 10% black students in a class of 200. Okay? That we could never qualify because we're black. We shouldn't be here. We don't belong. The fact is, we do belong. Okay? It is not you who tell us who belongs. Okay? You are simply public servants. You serve us. As we hold the government to accountability, we're going to hold you to accountability. If we demand transformation of every single institution in this country, why should we not demand transformation from you? What gives you the right to make decisions on our behalf? You have no such right. Unless you're prepared to democratize your institution and bring in fundamental changes in terms of decision-making to include more black people, more other stakeholders and workers. I'm suggesting, and I have to finish off now, okay, I'm suggesting that real change, as when I bought independent media, and I said, let's not tinker at the edges, because it's not, if we're going to serve our country well, if we are going to give voice to all people in our country, no matter where they come from, if we're going to try and create the South African society that we all fought for and we so desperately desire, let's not do it by tinkering at the edges. Let's bring about fundamental change. Just in case you're mistaken, I want to make it very clear, I'm a non-racialist. Okay? In every aspect of my life, I've been a non-racialist. For me, the issue is not about simply black and white. The issue is about power. The issue is about ideology. The issue is about cabals. The issue is about jobs for pals, contracts for pals. The issue is about promoting your friends and those that come from your social circles into professorships and senior lecturers. The issue is about ignoring black people. And the issue is about trying to defend statistics which are indefensible. 20 years into our democracy, these statistics are not acceptable. Now, I know that I may have angered many of you. And I know I may have lost a few friends along the way. But I've gotten used to being a lonely person. You know, one friend said to me, the day that you own the media, you lose all your friends. It's entirely true, okay? Because now I have to stop, okay? So, with that, all I have to say is, this is not about me, and neither is it about you, okay? This is about the future generations. And the struggles that you're doing right now is to lay the foundation for real transformation in terms of content, symbols, But ultimately, transformation only comes about. In my entire life, I've learned one thing only. Until you change the power structures of an institution, you will have no transformation. You'll simply have superficial and artificial changes. I've overstayed my welcome. Thank you very much.
Dr. Casey?
That's fine. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. Before I start, I would also like to mention that although the views I'm expressing today are my personal views, I'm a member of Transform UCT, which is a group of black academics at UCT. And we work together on issues of transformation. I think Dr. Price mentioned something very important, which is the role of the university in society. And they are key institutions in our society because the thinking and the research that happens here is going to impact outside. So what happens at UCT, the transformation that's happening at UCT is very closely linked to the transformation in the wider society. Every year we get a new cohort of students who will, during their time at UCT, learn certain skills and learn to think in particular ways. So they learn an orientation to thinking which they will then apply to whatever they're going to do next. So the research that we do necessarily has impacts beyond the confines of the university. Hence, transformation at UCT is closely linked to the social change more broadly. As stakeholders of this university and as active participants in this city, in this country and continent, it is therefore incumbent upon us to engage with transformation and to determine what it is that we mean by transformation. As a starting point, I suggest a change in the discourse of transformation. Instead of transformation, what we should be speaking of is the decolonization or Africanizing of our institutions. Often the discourses we use serve to sanitize, to normalize, or conceal oppressive practices. When we speak of decolonization, it becomes obvious why Rhodes must fall. Whereas when we speak of transformation, it inserts doubts or the possibility of dialogue into what are clearly cultural symbolisms of oppression and violence. By talking of a decolonized university, we highlight the historical legacies of capitalism, racism, and patriarchy as intrinsic to UCT culture and practices, and we foreground the need to break from this past. By talking of an African university, we move away from Eurocentric theorizing and locate ourselves in a national and regional context that centers the African and that centers African knowledges and practices as vital to human relationships and growth. The events of the past few weeks surrounding the Rhodes Must Fall campaign have reinvigorated this drive. As many have pointed out, this movement is not just about a statue, but about the need to decolonize the institutional culture and practices of the university more broadly. Black academics, students, and staff have been involved in a series of conversations at Azania House about what it is that we mean when we speak of decolonization. And central to these conversations have been ideas about what a decolonized university would look like, but also what the role of the university is in decolonizing the society. Universities, and in particular university students, have been and continue to be central in driving social change both within the institution and within the society. Hence, change at UCT must be closely tied to change in our society. During these conversations, a particular focus that resonated with me was about the legacy of violence: economic, political, cultural, psychological, and epistemic violence. We live in contexts characterized by vast differences in access to resources, where competition and conflict are pervasive and palpable. Economic poverty, health concerns such as HIV/AIDS, malaria, Ebola outbreaks, gender-based violence, xenophobia, and racism are all manifestations of the historical power dynamics that have given rise to social inequalities and that have created the context for poverty, discrimination, and violence to flourish. These forms of violence are key issues that universities should be addressing. One scholar who is here today, one scholar in the conversations mentioned the centrality of epistemic violence as one that facilitates all other forms of violence. This is because when we think of others as less than human, then it is possible to act towards them in dehumanizing ways. Our disciplines, be it psychology, anthropology, engineering, or law, or any other discipline, have historically prioritized thinking and practices that legitimized apartheid and colonization. In other words, universities focused on theories, methods, and projects that serve the interests of the dominant or the privileged. Therefore, this epistemic violence, which is at the heart of the modern university, is also at the heart of how we understand and intervene in social inequalities and conflict and social change. It is our task as scholars and stakeholders of this institution to rethink the role of our university in relation to our social context. Is the knowledge that we produce relevant to the societies in which we live? Is it serving those who are most marginalized in society, or does it serve to further marginalize and oppress? Many scholars have argued that approaches to learning should value and prioritize the experiences and knowledges of those who are marginalized in society. These questions point directly to questions of decolonizing UCT and the role of academics, students, and staff in this institution. Our ability to participate in and generate research that can reshape this society depends on our ability to be recognized for our lifestyles, knowledges, and worldviews. A decolonized university is one that explores the linkages between what is globally recognized as academic knowledge in relation to the everyday experiences of Blacks in this institution and the everyday experiences of the vast majority of people in this country and continent. Indeed, the experiences of Blacks at UCT point to feelings of alienation that impact on academic scholarship and aspirations. A shift in the discourse from transformation to decolonization opens up new possibilities for thinking. It would shift the discourse of standards and excellence away from ideas about Blackness as compromising the university and Black students and staff as needing to catch up. Our engagement should be premised on a discourse of standards and excellence that is contextualized and resonant to the needs and conditions of Black people. Instead of having our professional competencies measured through our visibility in international journals, for example, our recognition as Black and African scholars should be the extent to which our research impacts on the decolonization and transformation of our society. Instead of presenting academic freedom as an ahistorical, value-free, and neutral concept, academic freedom should be contextualized and emerge through the relationship between academic knowledge and the knowledge of people located on the margins of society. Young people, women, LGBT people, the disabled, the economically and politically disenfranchised, or those who have suffered displacement and various other forms of oppression. Recentering the discourse and recentering Africa would then necessarily lead to structural and practical questions, such as, What kind of research is prioritized and recognized? Who and how are research ethics decided upon? Fundamentally, too, we could talk about who teaches, what is taught, and how it is taught. Alongside that, we can talk about who is taught for who and for what purpose. In addition to these, we can interrogate our conception of governance, such as what type of management structures or lines of accountability facilitate or impede on the project of decolonization. The current low numbers of Black academics is unacceptable. Compounding it is the fact that there are still departments in this institution with not a single Black South African academic. Such facts highlight the slow pace of change that has taken place to date, and therefore the need for a renewed commitment. One explanation for this slow pace is what we call transformation at UCT, which tends to take place through uncoordinated and piecemeal projects, such as Kuluma, and often projects which do not actually target Black academics specifically, such as NAP, which is the New Academic Practitioners Program, the Emerging Researchers Program, or PERC, which are often examples that are given of transformative practices at UCT, but are actually open to all staff. What we need to do is to work towards a comprehensive and collaborative process of decolonizing our institutions. Given the momentum generated by the Rhodes Must Fall campaign, in particular the central role of students, an organized group of Black academics, and the participation of organized labor at the university, UCT, with the support of its alumni, and as one of the leading institutions on this continent, should continue to take an important role in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Casey. We're going to move straight into questions. Can I get an indication so we can take the first round of questions? I'm going to ask that there's a hand up there. Can I get we'd like to take several questions. There's 2 questions over here. Can we have one more and one more? All right. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Can I ask that the questions you try to be as brief as possible and that you identify yourself by name only, please.
Thank you. My name is Randolph van Voore. I don't have 3 degrees like Dr. Iqbal Sourbe, who is also known to me. I only have 2 degrees from this institution, and with the support of this institution, a 3rd degree from the London School of Economics. I also plead guilty to being a founder member of the Black Law Students Forum at this university. It was our belief in the late 80s and early 90s that Black students in my class, both the undergrad and subsequently the LLB, were not given a fair shake. And so we founded then the Black Law Students Forum. I'm told, or it is rumored, that this initiative has been re-established. I say all strength to the arm of the creative energies of the students. I think it is magnificent that such energy has returned to UCT. I do not propose to enter the debate other than to say the following. 88 was my first year, 89 was my second year, etc., etc. 92 was my final year. I felt no inferiority when I came here from a Black government school. I felt no sense that I was somehow inferior, that somebody could tell me that I am a lesser person. I am surprised that there are such vital, energetic, thoughtful, and organized young Black men and women who hold those views. I do not know how how it is that in your being as a vital, living, thriving person, you can consider yourself inferior to someone else. That's the first observation I wish to make. Just rid yourself of those inferior notions. Own the space and claim it. The second observation I wish to make is the following. I was a very troublesome student. I founded the Black Law Students Forum with other students, not from a position of weakness. It is because I am a very competitive person to the core. For every single year of my degree, undergrad and postgrad, I was on the Dean's Merit List. Not some. And toch al 5 class medals in my undergrad and a minimum of 3 per year for my LLB. It is from that position that I told other students there is only one way that we will advance equality here. That is if we, as young people, get that reading list from Professor Blackman with 238 cases prescribed for company law, and we study them backwards, so that when you wake me up on a Thursday, I will explain to you Salomon versus Salomon from 1861 until the most recent cases of the 1980s.
Thank you.
Ah,
Thank you.
my question is the following. My question is the following. If you want to decolonize the law faculty, you must flood it with levels of students, black, young,
Please
women,
wrap up.
LBGD, who are the best and the brightest.
Thank you.
Not the also-rans.
Thank you.
That is the project of
Thank you. There are
decolonization.
other Black alumni who would like to speak. Thank you very much. There was... Please, can you let the person who has the mic speak?
Hi, my name is Della, and I'm a master's student here at UCT, and my question is directed to Dr. Max Price. I find it interesting that he mentioned disco as a transformative tool at this university, because they're a very underfunded, understaffed, and ineffective office that has no idea how to deal with discrimination, sexual harassment, and sexual assault. Dr. Price, I want to ask you, do you know how many, especially black women, are leaving this university because of how badly their cases of sexual assault and sexual harassment have been handled? No, we don't know that because that office does not release statistics on the cases of discrimination, assault, and harassment on this campus. And for those of us who stand at the intersection of both racism and sexism, this place is dangerous and threatening. And we need to decolonize both race and gender at this institution.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Visa Kabaka. I'm not going to go through my CV.
Yes, please don't.
You can look it up on Google. You know, every time I come to UCT, I learn something new and something different. And today, I'm going to walk away with a great lesson. Vice chancellors are no different to politicians. So I've learned something valuable today that I'll take away. Dr. Price, something was mentioned that was really fundamental this evening, and I hope you got it. One of the key things that's not being discussed openly in our society, I was here 15 years ago. And it amazes me that the issues that we were dealing with as students and student leaders 15 years ago are the very same issues that we're dealing with today. I was at the founding of the UCTABA, and then we took a lot of flack and beating for trying to drive transformation as a black collective of alumni at this university. By the media at the time, that's before your time, Dr. Sove. By the media, by everybody else who just couldn't understand why it was that we're really trying to drive transformation in the way that we're trying to do it. And perhaps Rod didn't do enough justice to that discussion. But here's a point. The point fundamentally is around the issue of excellence and transformation. These two words somehow create a conflict. It seems in this institution that excellence cannot equal transformation and transformation cannot equal excellence, which is why fundamentally we avoid driving transformation, because if excellence was part of process of transformation, we'd be grappling with it and running with it like nobody's business. The reason why we don't do it, is that somehow we fear that we're going to lose something when we transform an institution. Okay? And this was mentioned by the prof. So again, beyond just trying to grapple with issues of really what transformation is, decolonization, the drive for a new African future, part of what we need to understand, and this you can drive through your leadership, sir, because I'm sure, like a politician, you made a lot of promises when you ran for your post. I wasn't here. I missed that one. So you're lucky. As far as I'm concerned, you're quite lucky that some of us were not here at the time when you're going for your position. But I think, how do you contextualize excellence and transformation in one common conversation that all people, the students, the staff, everybody knows that the common value of the future that we're trying to create for the institution is based on these key values, and they carry each other one-on-one. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Teboho Sipanya. Suffice to say, I'm an alumni of this institution. Mine is actually not a question, but a comment. Yes, concerns of the student body and the whole UCT community are legitimate. And can I say, they are illegitimate and probably valid. But my concern is that we be careful that we're not swayed and in the process become hijacked by external bodies like your social bodies like your CISCONA peoples, the ones who are doing who throw poos at university, at the airport and stuff, political organizations like your EFF, the ANC Youth League, and the Right to Know, that we be careful not to lose focus, that those bodies don't hijack us, hijack the program that the university has embarked on, and then you end up now going on a tangent, no longer being on what you initially were on about. That's just my concern and my plea to the, to this family called UCT.
Thank you very much. There weren't many questions. Most of those were comments. I'm going to ask the panelists to respond, but I'm going to ask you to keep your comments very brief, please, because I'd like to take another round of comments.
Thanks. May I also just comment on a few points made by the other panelists? Quickly. Okay, quickly. Well, in terms of the, I wanted to correct, I just don't want people to walk away with statements that have been made which are actually incorrect. So Dr. Survey made some statements about students, for example, pissing on a black man and beating up a cleaner linked to a club. Many of you will know the news items, so I won't elaborate. I want to emphasize that we condemned that kind of action very strongly, but we also said that we will follow the court procedure. It was not appropriate for us to replace the court procedure, because if the court comes up with one finding and we come up with another finding, it becomes very complicated. We do not have the power to subpoena the witnesses, who are mostly outside, but we've committed certainly that if any finding of crime or breach of student discipline, we will certainly prosecute. And we do that all the time. Recently, there have been a whole slew of terribly racist comments made on Facebook and Twitter linked to the protests around the statue. We deplore those comments. They're completely unacceptable. We are investigating everyone. And I need to say that up to now, we have not been able to find any that can be attributed to students at UCT, people over whom we have some jurisdiction. In other words, many people use pseudonyms or tweet and Facebook anonymously. But where we can find a student, someone or a staff member, we will certainly prosecute. We do not tolerate that. The question that was asked to me, I'm trying to remember what the very last one was. It was Della, it was Adela, I think, asked a question. I'm sorry. Yes, disco. Actually, I'm distressed to say that I've never heard that comment. I've been unaware of dissatisfaction with disco, and I certainly have no idea of how many people have left. I would ask whether you or anyone else who's had that experience have ever taken it up beyond disco, because we do to some extent rely, we've put in other processes. We have a whistleblower line, we have an ombud, we have someone who disco reports to, which is the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Crane Sedin. We have a number of mechanisms. If I do think that people
Dr.
need to
Price,
raise
please
these with
wrap
us.
up.
Okay, but I'll certainly investigate now, because it's meant to be an effective body, and if it doesn't deal with that, it doesn't. Okay, I'll.
Okay. Other panelists want to comment? Respond? No? You all happy? Okay. So I have one.
There was another question put to me, which Advocate Solomon is about excellence and transformation.
Can you incorporate it into the next round of comments? He will respond, he will incorporate. He's had longer to speak than anybody else. I'm not going to give him another 5 minutes so that nobody else speaks. This person is speaking.
Hi, my name is Ivy Nganga. I'm not alumni, haven't graduated yet. Max Price might not let me. But I just want to ask, because in the course of the last 2 weeks being part of a student movement, I've listened to a ridiculous amount of Dr. Price's speeches. And I keep hearing you give us figures and nice little blocks of sugar and how you're trying really hard. And my question is really simple. As a university that's supposed to be the forefront of our society, that gives people the skills to function in our society, and that should be creating the kind of people that better our society in the future, is UCT unable to change or incapable of changing? Because if it's incapable, let us know. We have some suggestions. And it's no point sitting through these processes and you giving us numbers every time when it just sounds like you're saying, I've been trying, but I don't know how.
Thank you, Ivy. It's fine, even if you have a shop steward's voice. And then when you finish, to the woman behind you in yellow, please.
No, thanks, Chair. My name is Lundu Sokoto, an alumni of this university, which of course is not as valuable as other alumni, an alumnus of this university, but who's not as important or as valuable as other alumni of this university in the eyes of the management. So those who are important are those who are printed there at the end of the program, graduation program. Because in the society that we are in today, it does not matter how brilliant, talented you are, how gifted, if you don't have money, if you don't have wealth, you are no different from furniture. And it would be expected that a university of this caliber would be one of the institutions that try and reshape knowledge and try and correct the many injustices and the many false consciousness that exist in society, that in order for you to be valuable, you have to have money, or you must actually, contribute to the donations of this university. And I don't know how we're supposed to contribute when we still have to pay loans for the fees that were charged by this university. But my question is for Ramapina. As the SRC, when the council takes the decision tomorrow to remove the statue, I'm saying when, because the argument that I don't think council that is allegedly committed to transformation and all the values and the principles that are listed in the value system of UCT would want to own a symbol and a statue of oppression. And the fact that the arguments that have been raised about the good side of his life, the business side of his life, it's just as the same as telling abusive women, women in abusive relationships, that actually just ignore the fact that he's beating you. Stay, because at least he brings a meal on the table. So that one that is raised by the Vice Chancellor, I think we must just dismiss it. It does not matter. So when the council takes the decision tomorrow to remove it, will you be part of, will you ensure that as the SRC you protect students? Because now it won't belong to the university. We know they'll say that, no, now it's up to the Western Cape Heritage Council. But when it takes the decision, it means it's no longer property of the university. So will you ensure that no one actually gets charged if should anything happen to that statue? Because it won't be damaged. Because it won't be damaged. It won't be damaged to UCT property, because council, like Senate did, would have said that this is not, we agree the statue must go down, so it's not our property.
Thank you,
Are you willing?
Lundu.
Are you going to be part of that process?
Thank you,
very
Lundu.
much.
Can you pass it on behind you?
Thanks, Chair. My name is Nobukosi Dlamini. I'm also a graduate from the science faculty here at UCT. I first want to start off by commending the student activists who are here and to say well done to them for taking a stand in this university. And I want to encourage you that you should continue putting the agenda of transformation in the center even after Rhodes statue falls, because it surely will fall. It's not going to remain for much longer. My question is directed at Dr. Price. I think the challenge that we have here is that this issue of transformation seems to be a side project that is going on the side with little piecemeal initiatives here and there, where we are trying to incorporate these black people into this university. And there is no program that I'm hearing from you that addresses the core fundamental cultural issues which black people find deeply emotionally painful and things that actually make people feel isolated in this university. I would like to just challenge you on that one, that as from what you have said thus far, we haven't had anything concrete in how are you actually addressing the issue of cultural barriers in this university. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have about 8 hands up, but I'm not going to. There's in the white shirt. That's the last question I'm taking, and then in the next round, the person here.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson. My name is Mohammed Khalid Sayed. I'm also a graduate of this institution. Mine is basically a couple of questions and also basically just to state a couple of, stuff.
Not too many, Mohammed.
No, not too many. Number one, and this seems to be something which I picked up sitting in the previous meeting, the alumni meeting. There's this perception that has been created, and in fact UCT has created this image of itself, and you feel it when you're a student here, that the university is a liberal institution, and that liberalism equals anti-racism. Now, my question is, particularly to Dr. Price, when is the university, because I can't recall this discussion ever having taken place. When is the university going to be academically brave enough to actually have a seminar, number one, or a dialogue on the difference between liberalism and non-racialism or anti-racism? Because it seems to me as if the kind of liberalism that we've been taught at UCT and that has become, in a sense, pervasive at UCT, has actually been one which sustains and maintains racism. The racist feels comfortable. Earlier this evening, when a man of white origin could stand up and call one of the comrades, one of the protesters who threw the poo on the Rhodes statue, could call him a savage, He was actually made to feel comfortable there. It was seen as if, no, he's also contributing in terms of the diversity. And that's the kind of value and culture that you learn here. It's as if we're on some little island on the mountain. And we can just talk and talk. Hence, action is not taken. Hence, the Rhodes statue is still standing. Hence, even after the council meeting tomorrow, where a decision may well be taken that the statue must be removed, you are still going to find the university management are going to say, no, we need to consult Heritage, Western Cape, we must consult government, this type of thing. They're going to shift the buck. And my question then, in that context, about shifting the buck even around the removal of the statue, has the university conducted research as to whether or not the Rhodes statue is actually a heritage site? Or is the university a heritage site? Has it consulted the 1983 Government Gazette, where the university was described as a heritage site? Has it actually looked into that issue? Because what is being purported here is that no, even if we take a decision to remove it, we'll still need to consult further and this type of thing. It ties in with that whole liberal agenda of no, let's not take action, let's talk about it, let's express ourselves.
Thank you, Mohammed. Okay, I'm going to let the panelists respond. I have 5 hands for the next round, and I think I'll need some guidance from UCTABA about time. So I will take the next 5, but no, you're not one of the 5. So I'm going to let the panelists respond quickly. Okay, the panelists don't want to respond. There were specific questions to the president of the SRC and the VC. You don't want to respond? I can take the rest of the questions.
Hello. I think firstly, what I want to say is, it seems like the university is stuck in the same rhetoric. If it was really moving in the right direction and the right pace in terms of transformation, we wouldn't be here. The fact that we are here is testament that the university is not transforming enough at an adequate sort of pace. That's why you have black academics organizing themselves. That's why you have black students organizing themselves and saying that we need to transform this institution. And firstly, my belief is, I've been telling people to the question posed to me that we need to be asking ourselves whether taking down the statue is actually, do we want to go to prison for taking down the statue? Or do you want to go down to prison for actually demanding that the entire university actually transforms? Because I think if we're to, go to jail for a particular statue, there are still other issues that we need to be addressing. So there should come a point where this is actually an issue that is adequate enough for us to be saying, enough is enough, this we are going to jail for. Now the issue is coming around of, definitely in terms of my particular sort of views, I think a time might come if the university does not wake up, and it seems like they are not waking up, that we might consider the issue of actually students actually protesting such that we are going to be imprisoned. But the question at hand is that whether is it for a statue or is it actually for demanding or for staying at the Vice Chancellor's sort of office and saying, give us staff transformation, give us insourcing. So we really need to think critically around what will be the issue that will actually end up in prison. But is it for a statue? I don't believe that's so. Thanks.
VC?
Thank you. The previous round had raised the question of excellence and transformation. And I agree with the speaker, I think it was Viso, that that these two are not alternatives and they do not compete with each other, and quite the opposite. Of course, transformation means lots of things, but for the purpose of this thing, I think you were particularly talking about representativity. And representativity is a contributor to excellence. In a university, you need, where ideas matter, to have a community of academics or of teachers who are homogeneous and all think the same or all come from the same background does not generate excellence. The excellence is enriched by having that diversity. And it's not only, of course, in the South African context. It doesn't mean only people from different race groups in South Africa, but people from different countries in the continent who bring a perspective of political development in their area or economics or inequality. And so I think if that message is confused, if it comes out as though those are alternatives, I certainly am I'm committed to saying the opposite is true. And when people say, you know, for example, when we have a selection committee and we may have 2 candidates, black and white, just to simplify the dichotomy, and the white candidate may be stronger in terms of having more publications or having more supervised more PhDs. I will often argue, and I think others as well in these committees, that what the black candidate brings, we have plenty of people who supervise PhDs and who've got lots of publications. If we don't have many black researchers in that department, then what 1 or 2 new additional black candidates bring is new perspectives which we can't otherwise have. So I agree with you, and we must get that message across clearly. You asked whether I'd made any promises. My promises are all on video from my inaugural speech, so you should go through that and we can talk and tick some of them off, and others I haven't been able to succeed in. The question that was asked about, I'm afraid Khalid, I think it is, made reference to the previous meeting, the convocation meeting. I came away from that incident with a very different view. One spokesperson talked about the Puthro and said, how can, you know, the person is a savage, or how can you allow such savage acts? But what struck me was that 3 people got up in the audience specifically to criticize that speaker. 2 were white and 1 was black, to say, you know, this is not a place for that sort of insulting language. That is divisive. That doesn't help us take the debate forward. That is offensive. And I thought that person was actually put in his place pretty smartly by the other speakers. So I came away thinking we didn't just allow it or feel comfortable with it. The question of Heritage Western Cape, yes, we have done our research. We have commissioned, who asked the question about Heritage?
Mohammed.
Sorry,
Mohammed.
I can't see. Anyway, Mohammed, that we have retained a heritage consultant, which is actually what you have to do in terms of the Act. We have established that it is part of a national monument protected site, and so we're not willing to break the law. And I think in our leadership that we provide in the country, we need to be careful that taking down the Rhodes statue doesn't become an excuse or a legitimation of any statue of any villain simply being destroyed. Heritage and history are important. This statue should be moved because of what it says about UCT, not just about who Rhodes was, but we are doing it in a legal way, in a deliberative way, and I think that's the example we must set to the country, that we mustn't have people just burning tires over statues they don't like, because then it'll never end and we'll have chaos. We have a law that protects us, and we must follow it. The question about whether alumni with money are more valuable than others was presented as a question, although I think it was rhetorical. I don't think they are. The fact that we reflect those people who have donated, and many of them are not alumni, in our graduation program is one of the ways in which we incentivize people to give money. It doesn't mean we value them more. In fact, many of them are foundations or companies. They're not even individuals. But it's that money which allows us to transform, because that is the money which ensures that every student that we admit here can get a bursary. If we didn't get that money, we wouldn't be able to provide access in that way, and all the other things that
Thank
that
you,
money
Max.
buys.
Big Paul, you wanted to say something? Yeah.
So I just want to take up the one notion and maybe just clarify. The notion that UCT is liberal, I mean, I can't even accept that. Frankly speaking, I think it's a very conservative institution. And I say this from a scientific point of view. You know, when I was at this institution, there were people of power that are at whatever you want to call it, Zania House, Bremner, whatever, that are still there today. The very people that implemented the apartheid policies of preventing black students, willingly by the way, from coming to this institution, are still there today. Contested, if you will, Max, but they're still there today. Those are the key decision makers. Those are the key decision makers that continue to make decisions in this institution. That is not acceptable. The very people that prevented black people from coming here having to apply for permits, having to have the permits, and it's going through the humiliation of having to have the permits renewed every year. The very people that told us you do not belong in this institution are still very much at Bremno/Azania House. Now, I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that I make the point again, all of this, the Rhodes statue, while I was sitting here thinking, it's one thing to remove the statue. It's another thing to remove the living embodiment of the statue, okay? Because people can hide behind fancy language and talks and all of these things. But until they show real commitment to change, with a program of change that effectively democratizes the institution in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of very many other things, in terms of the core decision making. That's the very key. I have not heard Max Price say a single thing about real change at this institution today. I've simply seen him talk at the edges. Okay? I gave him some advice a couple of months ago. I gave him advance warning in my office with Mr. Crane Sodin there. Okay? And I told him, you don't understand the undercurrent of issues at this institution. Instead of listening to me, they played the man instead of the ball. Right? They ignored my good advice which I gave them. I'm again giving Mr. Price and the leadership of this institution good advice. Don't come for me. Okay? I'm just simply telling you what the issues are. You need to change the institution completely and be brave enough, Max. You and I come from a long history of struggle. Okay? Be brave enough to fundamentally change. One more second. Just change the institution at its core. Don't tinker at the edges.
Okay. In the purple cerise top. Here.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Colleen Brenkies, and I'm a graduate of this law faculty. And just a short comment from me is, I just feel that issues of the absence of meaningful change within this institution are so closely linked to the same issues within our broader society. And my question is UCT producing socially conscious graduates? And I don't believe that we are. And my question to all of the Black alumni here is, what is our responsibility as Black alumni? Are we going back into our communities? Are we feeding into our communities and equipping people to exercise agency in their own lives? Or are we talking about things conveniently? So I just think we have a lot to think about coming out of this. And not to think about to do, we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Atenkosi, also an alumni. I think my question, since we started talking about the statue, I think my question is around sort of representation and naming. The Vice Chancellor mentioned the naming of buildings and how this has changed. My observation is that the image of success within those buildings, the paintings that you see, are very much of white professors who have doctorates and things like that. And the imagery of black bodies in these buildings and in these paintings are always naked. And now I wanted to ask the Vice Chancellor, what is the justification behind exoticizing black bodies within these buildings that are given black names just, to be politically correct? Thank you.
Thank you, Archie. Yeah. She's had her hand up for a long time. You're next. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So, my name is Rushan Khalfan, and I'm an alumni of UCT and also currently an associate professor in occupational therapy. So my question or my comment first is that there's been much contestation about who's included and excluded and in what ways that happens when we speak about the black experience in transforming and decolonizing institutions. So my question to the panel is, how does the panel suggest that we navigate this space? at this point in time.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Paul Mbele.
Can't hear. Can you say that again?
Yeah, it is. Peter Paul Mbele. I graduated from this institution in 2007. I must say, the question is to Dr. Max Price. I was really moved by Dr. Kes's take on what should be university's take of a stand, of pride of place in society. And I remember quite vividly Dr. Max Price's installation, where he spoke beautifully about an Afropolitan university. And by your own admissions, you have not achieved much. I am just thinking of the issues that she has raised, the substantive issues of scholarship. What have been the stumbling blocks? I've just learned of a program at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where they've taken up 300 academics and put them under a developmental program to train them and mentor them as professors. And I think that is what you call brevity when we talk about an Afropolitan university, when you talk about such a vision. I wonder if you would say that, are you the same man today who took to the podium that night?
Testing. Greetings. Siyamthanda Yanela Songa. And my question goes to the one lady that's sitting over there, invited as a guest speaker.
Dr. Casey.
No, I was going to say the name, but yeah, Dr. Casey.
Not the one lady.
And in particular, hoping that next time we organize an event, we get more representation for females. But on that note, Dr. Casey, are you not worried? I know that you are part of a group of black lecturers. Are you not worried that the university uses perpetual dialogue in the guise of trying to get things to happen effectively, but in actual fact, doing it out of strategy to try and literally crush it and stifle it? Are you not worried that all of what is dragged in discussion is actually a way of saying, no, eventually they will be filtered out? Eventually, like the SRC, will serve a term and will actually move out. I've experienced this. I was once part of student governance. You fight a lot of things, and then you're out in no time. Hopefully this doesn't happen to you. Then I move on to the second part, which is highly linked to this, that Dr. Price states that no one in the SRC had put down a proposal for the removal of the statue, a concrete proposal. Now, I ask you that, is it the role of staff that is supposed to be teaching? Is it the role of teachers that are supposed to be learning? Or is it the role of management who's supposed to be governing to think of ways to govern the university? I think it's truly unfair to then come back and say, oh no, but you never proposed it. Yet you are the one that's supposed to be governing it in a progressive manner.
I'm Zubaida Jaffa. I was an alumnus. I graduated in the 70s. UCT was a very, very different place. And I can share with you many, many stories of I would even say cruelty. But the time doesn't allow for it. What I just want to say, having listened to Ramabina, going to jail at this point is not what we need. That could be a sort of almost like, and I can assure you jail isn't fun. It's a very hard experience to go through, and I wouldn't want to wish it on anyone. I know there's sometimes the view that, perhaps we can also go through all these things that the last generation went through. But if I had a choice, then that's not where I would have wasted time. You can't waste time now to send our best brains to jail. We've got to use our best brains to make the universities, and this university, a place where we feel comfortable, where we are affirmed, and where we can be truly ourselves. We can't be one person when we are at university and be another person at home. And that is essentially what is happening. We're one person at university, and we have to be another person at home. We have to have one conversation at university, and we have to have another conversation at home. We can only have certain conversations in the privacy of our circle of friends and our families, and then we have to have other conversations in the public domain and in our academic circles. That cannot go on. We cannot have a situation where we, as South Africans, we are South Africans, and now in numbers terms, we are the majority at a number of the universities, but we are a cultural minority. We do not feel comfortable with things that are assumed in our other life situations. Now, it's not as simple, I'll say to you, Ramabina, it's not simple because we are a whole lot of different people, and we do have different cultural backgrounds. The challenge for you as students now is going to really to sit down, to strategize, to think, to develop an approach that's not going to leave us still in the same position in another 10 years' time. You've got to be clever. We're expecting that from you, that you can create a UCT where we feel comfortable and where we feel that we are dealing with the problems that we need to deal with. I came to UFS. I'm at the University of the Free State 3 years ago, and I was shocked to find that in the Journalism and Communications department, there wasn't a whisper of the true history of journalism in this country. There wasn't a whisper of any of us who had played a role, but be that as it may, any of the people from the 18th century, 19th century had been absolutely great role models for us as a people. And that has to stop. That has to stop here at UCT. Every student that goes through UCT must know of the great academics and intellectuals and thinkers that come from way back, not now, recently, from way back. And there are many, many, many people. So the big challenge is curriculum change. That is the big challenge, and I would just like you to think about that. Thank you.
Okay, now people, we started 35 minutes late. We've caught that time up and taken on an additional 20 minutes. I am going to ask the panel to respond, but before I do that, every time I turn around, 5, 6, 7 more hands go up. Obviously, I understand that we can't, it would be ideal if we could have this conversation all night. However, like Zubaydah was saying, people have to go and do other things. So it is not practical. And I note that there, even as I'm speaking, more hands are going up. However, it's not possible for, people do need to go home. So I'm going to let the panelists respond and respond and make their closing comments very quickly, but everybody has 2 minutes. Rod, do you want to start?
I'm not going to take 2 minutes. I just want to thank all of you for coming. I think our sense is that this kind of discussion and debate is required at UCT. We as UCTABA will, as I indicated, we will work with the university and with the student body and the staff to assist that the university transform much faster. It's our view that the university is transforming way too slow. It needs to be bolder, needs to take bolder decisions, and make the university uncomfortable for those who publicly say they are supporting transformation, but in private or in their faculties, etc., they do something else. Another issue that we actually want to spend a lot of time on is the whole issue of the outsourcing of a lot of functions that workers at UCT used to do, that a lot of the people are no longer workers or employees of UCT. It's got a whole range of other implications. And that's a discussion and a debate we'd like to engage in. And we want to implore the students who are here to start thinking about that. The Rhodes statue is going to fall tomorrow. The issue is not only about the Rhodes statue. As I said, that Rhodes statue dam that is burst is code for something else that is not right at this university. And I think
you,
Dr.
Rod.
Price
More
has
than 2 minutes.
indicated as well that many years from here, many of you will be alumni, then you would remember the role that you've played in this regard. So thanks all for coming, and we want to continue this process in terms of how we can assist the university to transform.
Thank you, Rod.
Quicker.
Max? Ramabina?
You know, if we were to remember how this whole dialogue around transformation and the events happening around UCT, how they actually started, you know, they started by a man, you know, throwing poo at a statue and actually...
Is your mic on?
Hello? Okay, thank you. I'm saying the events around, you know, that brought about the debate were started by, you know, a student throwing poo at a statue, and that caused a lot of dialogue. He took a lot of risk. He could have gone to jail. He could have been arrested or something along those lines. Thus far, as students, we have said that we are willing to engage, and we've been engaging, we've been agitating for change. But still, we have not yet been heard, because we are expecting a quantum leap, essentially, in a radical transformation of this institution. And we'll continue to agitate. But as the same as other students, we cannot know. We do not know how, you know, what will happen in 2 weeks' time, especially if the institution continues to respond in the same way. We have said to ourselves that we are going to continue to agitate and we'll strategize. But then there might come a point where students are going to say, you know, enough is enough. And I, as the SRC president, or as an ordinary student, I cannot then say to other students, do not, you know, what you see as being, you know, the need, or, you know, because I think it can be said, we are all frustrated with UCT not changing, and we are frustrated with the same rhetoric, with the same response. We want change, and we want a quantum leap change, and that must be provided for.
I think I just want to respond to two issues, and the first one is around the cultural alienation that was mentioned by a few people. I think with some of the research that I've done here with black students, often when they arrive at this institution, they'll say that, you know, this is the first time I've felt black. And it doesn't matter how self-confident you are before you get here. It's the experience of being in this institution that has that impact. And as you can imagine, you arrive and the statue of Cecil John Rhodes is right there, but then there's a whole other set of practices that alienate and marginalize students. And these practices have real impacts on their academic performance. So when students do not achieve, it's largely or in part due to the cultural experience they have here. And I think the discourse of transformation also positions black staff as in an inferior position. We often hear that we are you know, in selection or promotions process, that we don't quite fit the mark, but we are chosen nevertheless. And I think that what actually, the reality of what we are experiencing here is that we actually are the best at what we do. But the problems is that there are barriers that are put in place in terms of whether we are hired, whether we are promoted. But we are actually the best at what we do. And I just wanted to end with a comment by a gentleman here who said something about how do we know that this time, what's happening now is going to be sustained? And it's a very difficult question to answer. I mean, when I first arrived at UCT, I was shocked by the statue. But over time, you know, it just becomes a normal part of everyday life. And so it takes something like the student movement now to remind us that these things are actually need to be dealt with. And students come and go, but as staff we remain, as alumni you remain. So I think that, you know, if we can sustain this movement, it will be because of your involvement as alumni and our continued involvement and commitment as Black academics. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I just want to say thank you for listening and for allowing us to be part of the panel. I think it was a very specific question about what can be done. Let's address that. I want to suggest, in line with what Zubeida has mentioned, let's create a committee that holds the institution accountable. That's really important. So let's create a committee of the workers, the academic staff, the students, and other staff. A non-racial committee that asks for real change and real decision-making in the institution. Let's have that committee organized at an institutional level as well as at a faculty level. And let that committee have a program of action, and let's give specific targets. Let's give Professor Price an opportunity to, in fact, prove what he's saying today. Let's set the targets for real transformation in decision-making. I think that's the first point I want to make. The second point is, it was Dr. Seshi's daughter that inspired me. She wrote a brilliant article in the Argus about what it's like to be, Kenya sitting there, what it's like to be Black living in Cape Town. That article was the most read piece on IOL, our internet platform. And it also attracted the most vitriolic racist comments. And of course, I invited her for tea. And subsequent to that, I took action as the first media owner to put in place a commission of inquiry into online comments. And I've received that report from the experts, and we're going to act against racist comments, gender, violent comments, etc., all these things, okay? Now, small changes bring about big changes. So this is part of an overall change. But I would like to give some more friendly advice to the institution, okay? I've given them advice for a long time.
30
Free of
seconds,
charge.
Iqbal.
Just one bit of advice, which is important advice. Please, I'm begging you not to ostracize the students that are leading this protest movement, not to ostracize the academics that have decided to put their names to paper, and not to penalize them for having the courage to speak out, okay? I'm asking you to accept that this is a democracy, that is an institution that allows for multiple voices, and to give them the space and not to ostracize them silently behind the scenes by preventing their careers. But I also want to say to you, if you do that, you will come up against me, okay? And I have substantial resources, okay? And I'm not a guy you want to tackle with easily, okay? So just remember that. I will defend their democratic right to differ with you. I will do that.
Thank you, Iqbal.
And the last point I want to invite, I'm going to do this. I want to invite every single one of you, black and white, okay, because our struggle is a non-racial struggle. It's not a struggle, you know, of one color, okay? It's a struggle. I want to invite every single person to write to Independent, like a Twitter thing, right, 140 characters, with your photograph, and we'll publish a full page of your views about UCT. So we'll give you a week, we'll work by the association, and I want our readers to hear your views about UCT. Black and white, whatever it is. Thank you very much.
Max?
There were many questions, most directed at me, and I don't think you're giving me enough time to respond to them. I want to therefore focus down on three. The one question was, am I the same person? I am. And I think that the way that the questioner asked or challenged the issue of, is the university a more Afropolitan university? I believe it absolutely is, and there is annual reports that submitted to council and are public, and I can certainly make them available to you. And I don't think that there's time for me to list what that means. That doesn't mean that it's transformed or that it is decolonized. Those are not the same thing as being an Afropolitan university. The second, and there is a lot that's achieved. I addressed a whole lot of that in my first remarks, and I can go further in one-on-one. The second is that there's a tendency in large meetings where people are speaking briefly to oversimplify things and not to recognize complexity. And I want to pick out two examples that have come up in the discussion, which I'm not wanting to be defensive about them. I'm wanting to show why I think that they need much more debate and are much more complex. So the one was the question of artwork around the university. Now, and the focus, it was mentioned that there are black bodies that are naked, and black people are reflected in the artwork and in the photography, often as being the sort of the oppressed and exotic and disadvantaged in society. And the first is to highlight that just outside this building, if you care to walk around, you'll see a whole lot of statues, which are all of white World War soldiers who have naked bodies. I don't think there's any preserve of male, female, or black or white in terms of nudity and the way they're portrayed. But secondly, much of the art that is criticized as being reflecting black people in inferior positions is in fact art that came out of the apartheid period, which was by activist artists who were wanting to highlight inequality, who were wanting to show what apartheid has done and has resulted in white people being the overlords and black people being the oppressed. That art is still on display. It was activist art, it was anti-apartheid art, it was liberation art. But I can understand how, in a different context, if you're a black student and you come to the university for the first time and much of what you see is photography or art that reflects those power relations, that you start saying that you start interpreting it as saying something about the place of black people in society. And so I recognize, and we need to recognize, that much of that art was by activists. We need to rethink, is it unmitigated? Does it need to have other art that speaks to it? Should it not be there? Should we take it down for a while and put it up later? These are complex issues. It's not simply about a racist institution that is trying to portray people in different ways. The other example was the ERP was mentioned with the Emerging Researchers Program. Now that program is a program which is intended to accelerate the careers of emerging researchers, and in some ways you could say that is code for black researchers and women researchers. When the program started, it was restricted to black researchers and women researchers, particularly black researchers or young academics. And Dr. Casey, I think it was, made a critical point or criticized that program because it's not restricted anymore. It's open to all emerging researchers. But that actually was a result of early evaluations that were done after the first 5 years or so, which showed that the black academics on those programs felt that they had been singled out by being labeled as Carnegie Fellows, which was how it was initially called, or fellows who were in a development program. That was sending out a message that they weren't good enough, that they were less well qualified, that they needed extra help. And it was actually very much the response to that first cohort, which was a black cohort, that it was agreed or felt that it should be all emerging researchers, the majority of whom would be black, though, and they are if you look at the figures. So again, it's not to say that we've got it right, but to highlight that these are complex issues, and sometimes we go one way and we make a mistake and we have to come back. The last point which I want to highlight is that what is clearer to me as a result of the last year or so of debates around transformation than it was before is that there is a lack of trust in the institution. And an example of this is about promotions and appointments, where people are saying, you talk, but we don't see any change. And the default position is that actually the committees have been discriminatory or prejudiced, and that there could have been a faster change. Now, some of us think there could be much faster change, some think it could only be a little bit faster, but clearly, because many of these processes are, for example, a selection committee is confidential, it tends historically to be dominated by people who are already promoted or already in senior positions, and there is a lack of trust. What we need to do and what we're committing to do is to having including on those committees people from a much wider spectrum and people who can somehow represent or speak for those who are still on the way up, those who feel that the system isn't working fairly, because we do want to make sure that it is transparent. We do want to make sure that everyone is confident that when a decision is made, it's not that someone has been promoted who didn't deserve to be promoted on the one hand, which is one thing that I think Dr. Casey said, but it's also not that someone's been excluded who should have been promoted against someone else who was unfairly promoted.
Thank you,
So
Max.
building up trust, I think, is a key part of the next stage of transformation.
Thank you, Max. I'm not going to try to speak too much about what has transpired today. You are all here. But I think that one of the trends that has emerged quite powerfully is the way in which various people who've spoken, students, alumni from different times in UCT's history, seem to stress that this is a time to listen. Not to defend the institution, but to listen. And I hear the Vice-Chancellor say it's a very different institution from when we were here in the 90s, from several people saying they were here in the 80s. But I listened to my colleagues both at this UCT Black Alumni event as well as Joburg Black Alumni event saying some of their children are saying remarkably similar things to the things that we felt when we were at UCT. So yes, the demographics of students have changed, but increasingly what I'm hearing from this room is that not enough has changed. That in fact the proper channels are part of the problem. That the bureaucracy, the structures resist transformation, and that this is a moment for listening and this is a moment for leadership. It's an opportunity to listen, to take on board what students, old and new and current, are saying. There's obvious unhappiness about the snail pace of change. And again, it seems as though now is not the time to defend an untransformed university, either through words or through the persecution of those who want to ensure that we don't have to have this conversation again 20 years from now, of those who want to ensure that we do have a decolonized UCT. Thank you very much to UCT, to UCTABA for hosting this event. Thank you all for coming. I've been asked to make an announcement of a mass meeting on Thursday, the 9th of April at 3 p.m. organized by Rhodes Must Fall at Azania House. And I will now hand over to Ms. Wyomia Mowers, who's an executive member of UCTABA, to give the vote of thanks. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wyomia Mowers, and I'm part of the UCTABA Western Cape Exco. Don't worry, I'll be brief. I see some people are leaving. Perhaps they are hungry, but if the rest of you are also hungry, we have drinks and snacks outside in the foyer, so just bear with me. I'd like to start by thanking all for attending and taking an interest and also making an input into transformation discussions at UCT. We'd like to render a special thanks to our speakers, Dr. Max Price, the Vice-Chancellor of UCT, Advocate Rod Solomons, Chairperson of UCTABA Western Cape, Dr. Iqbal Survey, past Chairman of UCT's Graduate School of Business and Governor of UCT Foundation, Mr. Ramabina Mahapa, who is the SRC Chairperson of UCT, Dr. Shosi Kese, Senior Lecturer in the Department of Psychology at UCT, and our Chairperson for the evening, Professor Pumla Gola, who is a UCT alumnus. We'd also like to render a special thanks to Sandile Zungu, who is a member of council who was nominated by by UCTABA to be on the council. Also, Diana Yach, chairperson of the Alumni Advisory Board, for attending, and Professor Barney Patiana, president of Convocation, and also the media who is in attendance this evening. We'd like to take this opportunity to extend our thanks as UCTABA to Mr. Lungile Jacobs and his team at the UCT Department of Alumni Development for the assistance with the arrangement of this event and for their continued support since the founding of UCTABA in achieving its objectives of transformation. That's why we're all here, and that's why we hosted the event, because we have two main objectives in UCTABA, and that is transformation and also to increase the number of constitutionally black students in academia so that it's representative of the South African demographic. And if you bear with me for just a moment, how we plan to achieve that is through our bursary fund, among other means. For those of you who have arrived early, you would have seen on the notice board out front, we have our latest report of our bursary fund out front here. We have past bursary recipients. So there is proof we don't just accept your money, we use it. And so outside this venue, we have an up-to-date report of our bursary fund and information about our 1,000 for 1 million campaign. We'd like to encourage you to support the initiative. There are forms available in the foyer, and you may leave them with UCTABA members here at the table this evening, or they can be faxed to the alumni office. We also have a few events lined up for this year. I'll mention them briefly. We have the launch of our mentorship program, which will be in the form of a gala dinner and a Women's Day public lecture, and also a homecoming event. If you have not already done so, please complete a registration form so we can update you on our events and activities. And yeah, that's it. I promised you I'll be brief. So thank you once again for all in attendance.